Hello and welcome to Blue Zone. In this video we're going to cover the FSX at War component called Carrier and Convoy Planner version 1328. Now if you're new to this tool, from here on out I will call it CCP. It is a great add-on, absolutely free, and developed by a bunch of talented guys that just want to make a FSX environment more conducive to military flying. This tool actually allows you to add targets, and as you see from the main screen, the splash screen when you start it up, it allows you to add tanks, allows you to add ships, it allows you to add planes. It even has a component where it allows you to create and manage some TPS file, which I have covered in a different video. So this tutorial will take you through every single component of the tool, and hopefully I can do it justice. Now if you're already used to CCP, you will see numerous changes. They're not drastic from the interface standpoint, but they're significant enough to make it more useful, especially if you do work with TPS files quite a bit. So let's get started. Let's get the objectives out of the way. So we're going to learn how to configure and use each section of the CCP. And we're also going to learn how to launch it in single player mode and multiplayer mode. I will also cover how you launch from the client side to a server that's running CCP. Why do we care? Well, it allows us to create realistic mission scenarios. So if you fly in a squadron where you're trying to simulate reality from a military standpoint, you know that it's a great tool to be able to set up some scenarios where there's inbound planes, for example, or you need to go attack a convoy, or you need to intercept bombers, or so on and so forth. So this tool will allow you to create some of that. Where would you use it? As I just indicated, in mission planning and for target practice. So you can use it in single mode, so you can actually practice doing weapon delivery and whatnot. Now if you've been watching my video series, you will see that some of the information that you've learned along the way with my videos, like for example GPS coordinates, will be very useful to you here. And the TPS video, how the TPS files work, will also be very useful to you, although in this edition of CCP there is a improvement in the TacPack area of the tool that you will be very pleased to see. Now the prerequisites. Well, the first one is the CCP is called is part of the unofficial TacPack companion, and therefore you need TacPack. It goes without saying you also need FSX. The tool will also run on Prepare 3D and Steam Edition. One prerequisite that you need is to install the FSU IPC4. Now this will prevent you from getting errors when you're trying to start on a carrier. You do not need to register it, you just need to install it, then run your FSX. The link is going to be in the description, and you do not, and I repeat, you do not need to purchase this. It's just a component of it that's required. If you're upgrading and you have a previous version of CCP and you've actually made some customization in the pa.cfg file, make a backup of it before installing the new version because it will be overwritten. So make a copy and then you can bring it back. To report bugs, you need to register on fsxwar.com, and here's some tips when you're reporting a bug. When you report an issue, if you can provide a way to replicate your issue, it will help them tremendously to replicate the issue at their end and see what you're seeing and therefore be able to fix it. It's only going to improve the product if we help report the issues that we're seeing. And also provide any logs you can. Event logs if you know how, screenshots if applicable, any information you feel necessary for them to be able to replicate your issue and identify what the issue is and correct it for the next version. I would like to expand a little bit on how to report a bug. In order to be able to replicate the issue that you're having, some information is required for the developer to be able to figure out what's going on and to fix it for you. So the info needed is your Windows version, whether it's a 32-bit, 64-bit, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, which simulator you're using when you're having the issue. As you probably can gather from what I have here, it works on FSX, FSX Team Edition, and Prepare 3D. If you have an SDK software development kit installed, which version is it? If you have FSU ICP installed, which version do you have installed? If you have TacPack installed, which version of TacPack you have installed? Which mode did you encounter the error in? Were you using it in single mode or multiplayer mode? And if you were in multiplayer mode, were you the one that was hosting the multiplayer session or using the multiplayer session as a client? A clear description of the issue or the bug that you've encountered. The steps to reproduce the issue, that is important because if the issue cannot be reproduced, it might be hard to confirm that it is fixed. And finally, provide an error.log and a pa.log that's at the base of your folder for CCP. Now, for the goodies, a change in version 1328. Now, if you've never used CCP before, don't worry, I will go through every option. But for those that have used it before, here's what took place. Numerous fixes, and that goes without saying, that's going to happen in every version. New ground vehicles, and I put the name of the person who contributed because Modus had it in his notes, and therefore I want to make sure credit is given where it's due. And Boss found a new Serbia map. There's also a conversion of GPS coordinates from decimal to degrees, minutes, and seconds in the TPS file created, and we'll look at that. The team selection was added for use with simple AI aircraft. So if you watch the TPS video and you know how the simple AI aircraft are configured in the file, the latest TacPack as of now, the 1.4, it escapes me, but the current TacPack that supports a simple AI aircraft team selection was added. And with that, the CCP now support that feature and allows you to select a team. You have the ability to save multiple OOB files as a mission. That is huge. So if you've used the CCP before, now you can create boats and multiple sets of boats, multiple sets of ground convoy, multiple sets of airplanes, and you can take all these together and save it as a mission. And therefore, next time you launch, you can load the whole mission at once instead of having to reload each individual section. It's a huge time saver, and it's fantastic. Now this one is exciting. So it allows you to import, modify, save, and create TPS files. So if you watch the TPS video that I've created, everything is manual, and I use Notepad++ to make changes and alter what I need. Well, the team, CCP team at the FSX at War, I've actually created something in the interface to allow you to import, modify, save, create TPS files. That's going to make it a lot easier, especially if you're uncomfortable making changes in a text file. And there was also a control left click provided as a heading helper in TPS, and I will demonstrate how that works. And lastly, numerous area are now editable after importing. So I don't know if you've seen this in previous version where you import a file and you want to change something and you're not able to. Well, numerous area are now editable, and we'll go through some of those. Now there's 3 run modes for the CCP. The first one is single player mode, so it's called single mode, and this one is when you're actually doing target practice on your own and you're not running a server. The second mode is if you're running a server yourself, Then you run server mode so that people can connect to your server and see the CCP missions that you've created. Now, one thing to be important here, if you're running a server and you want to host a CCP session, the server IP when you first start in server mode, leave it at 0000. It basically tells it, okay, my IP is the host. Now the people connecting to you will need to have your IP address, your server IP address. Another important point, those two ports that you see, 9050 and 9051, they need to be open in your firewall for the client to be able to connect. If you don't have those ports open, the clients will not be able to connect to you. And that is besides what you need to open in your firewall for hosting FSX. And there's an article from Microsoft on how to do that. And lastly, the third mode is the client mode. Now the client mode, if the server host did not change the ports, you would use the default ports. Nothing to do on your firewall, you should be fine. The server IP address should be the same IP address that you connect to with your aircraft to the FSX host that's hosting the multiplayer session. Now the interface. Drum roll. There we go. And the version 1.3.2.8. So it looks very much the same as the previous version. You have the same tabs. I saw some notes where some portions were rewritten. Like I said, these guys are very talented and they do a lot of work in here, and it's all on their own free time. So if there's something that may not work exactly like you would expect to, they're very open to suggestions, but just bear in mind they're doing this on their free time, and like you and I, it's their hobby. Okay, let's get started and let's take a look at the CCP in detail. We will begin by looking at the interface itself. I want to make sure that you have a high level understanding of how it works so that you're able to take advantage of all the features that are offered by the interface. Now, what's one thing to remember is the boat and the ground interface are very similar, and the concept is that you create a fleet of ships and you create a path for those ships to go somewhere. Then you add those to FSX. Now the ground is the same principle. You create a convoy of vehicles, then you actually create a path for those vehicles, and then you add them to FSX. And when you add the feature to FSX, what it essentially does, it puts into the monitor. So let's take a look at the boat. Like I was saying here, you create a naval task, and you'll have a screen to create a naval task. We'll go through that. And then you will create a naval path for your ships to go through. And then once you have a naval path created, you will add that information to FSX. So as you save those paths and the naval formation, we'll recall them here and give them a name, and then we'll add them into FSX. Now, one thing I want you to pay attention here is the start time. So the start time is actually in GMT. So what's important to know is that you need to be have the time taking this into consideration. So when you set your FSX, so right here I have 12:00:00 is my GMT time. So when I go and actually set up my CCP, I'm going to want to set a time ahead of that. So for example, I could set 12, 15, and 00. So what that will do is it will tell CCP that I'm going to start my FSX at 12:00:00. At 12:15:00, you start the CCP with this formation on this path, and that's important to keep in mind if you want things to work as expected. And you'll also get an option to join a carrier if you put a carrier in your actual naval formation. You can start on the carrier, and we'll see how to do that. Now, once you click the Add button here, you'll end up in the Monitor section. The Monitor section is what loads everything that you create through the interface. And don't worry too much about these buttons. We'll go through all of them. It would show here the actual formation of ships or convoy of vehicles or what have you. Now, once you have all this stuff in there, you would click on to connect to FSX, and then it'll turn green, and that means you're ready to go. You start your FSX and everything will work as you expect it to. Now you'll notice it says disable pause in FSX. Now it's not critical if you are playing in single player mode, simply because you pause, your sim will pause, and the FSX at war will pause. But if you're hosting on a server and you have other people connected to your server, if you pause, your GMT time on your server is no longer the same GMT time that the people that are connected to you have. So it will throw everything out of whack from a timing perspective. Something to keep in mind. Now the ground section, like I indicated, is very much the same. You create a convoy of vehicles, you create a route, and we'll show you how it works. And then you add the convoy, the vehicle, and the path that you gave them with a name, and then you can set the GMT time here and add it. Now the airplane section is a little bit different. It has a different interface. Notice that you have a chance to import, to create everything in feet or in meter. It will do the conversion for you. You can import an existing path, and that's what GPX, we'll talk about those GPX extension. That's what that's for. You can import an existing file. So if you recall, I haven't showed you that yet, but you can import a combination of airplane and path the airplanes are going. And once again, you do have to adjust here for the proper GMT. You can set default speed and you can set the default altitude. And notice here what it says, it's in feet. But now if I do press in meters here, it changes in meter. So you have to be conscious of which choice you're making. Now you have a choose destination here. You can simply type a city in there. So let's say I type Dare County in Virginia. And I hit enter, and it puts a pin exactly where Dare County is in Virginia. So that gets you quickly to the area you want to be in. And once you're done with all the configuration, you saved your path with all your planes, with your plane, you can actually click here to add to monitor, and it works the same way. So you'll have all your formations and your paths inside the monitor. Now the TacPack session, if you've actually used the TPS files, use the TPS features from TacPack, this here area is where you can actually work with TPS files. And the great thing they've done here, if they've made it so that it's now editable. So you can actually bring in an existing one, create a new one, bring in an existing one, modify it, save it as something else. They've done a great job here, giving us capability of doing all sorts of things. And the choose destination is the same thing again. You just put in the location that you want, it will bring it in for you. Now, one thing that's different with TPS files, those files, once they are created, they are not running as part of CCP. Those files are created and you need to load them from within your FSX in the TacPack menu, and we'll show you how to do that. And finally, the monitor we've already covered. You'll see here save and import mission. That is a great thing they've added here. It allows us to create some boat formations, some ground formations, and a path for those airplanes, and combinations of multiple, and then just they'll be all loaded here when we look in the monitor. You can actually save the mission, and what it does, it saves all these formations that you created that are here. So at a later time, let's say if you create this fantastic mission, well, you can just import the mission and all your stuff's going to be here exactly the way you had it set up. That's a great thing. And finally, the last step I haven't talked about is the credit. And here's all the people doing all this hard work to make the CCP app happen. So this is it for the interface high level, and we're going to continue and go through the boat section first. In the boat section, we are going to create a static fleet of Russian ships. So let's start by creating our formation. So we click on create naval task, and you will see here all your boats are shown to you, and that's what you can pick to create your formation. So I'm going to pick some of my favorite boats. Well, favorites, I like them all, but some of the ones that I want. Now before I select, I want them all to be stationary. So I will put 0 knots as a default speed. So when I add it, it puts it at 0 speed. So now I'm going to add some more Russian ships. Okay, so let's start with one of these, one of these, and I'm not going to spend too much time trying to look for ships, as long as you get the idea. And let me see here. And I'll add 2 of those. So now we have 5 ships. Now you may be wondering what this here is for. This is for future expansion, so do not worry about this this portion here for now. And let's take a look at the next option that we have. So we could have loaded a pattern that exists already, but we're creating a brand new pattern, so this does not apply. Now we can define a position. So remember, the carrier is number 1, and then you see the destroyers number 2 and 3, and patrol boat is 4 and 5. So let's go define position. Now if I click on one of them, you see the number that shows up. The number actually corresponds to the list that we just had. Now I'm going to put the destroyers up front, and I'll have the patrol boat scout forward. Now you may think that's a little bit small, but guess what? You can use your mouse wheel and actually zoom in. So let's zoom in, and then you can get very precise with your alignment. So I'm going to put him fairly close so we can see what it looks like once we get on there. So I now have my formation. I click validate to keep the formation that I have done, and it actually puts the distance between the ships and the angle. The next thing I want to do is I want to save the bolt pattern. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to call it stationary. Stationary Russian fleet. Okay, type. Now notice that the file that I saved the formation, all the formations, whether it's boat, planes, or vehicles, is .col, and you'll see what's important. Another thing to notice, it goes into the columns. So all those go into columns. If I look at columns, you'll have boats, vehicles, and planes. In my case here, it's a boat. It will go into the boat. The column file will go into the boat folder of the column folder. Now you'll see why later on why it's important to name it so that you can reuse them later on. So now I will place a trajectory for my fleet. So that first I'm going to zoom in to the area that I want to place it in. I'm going to go in an area where I am familiar with, that I use all the time. And if you watch my videos, you'll recognize the dare range. So now I want the fleet to be static. So I will create one waypoint, and the way you do this is by right-clicking each time you want a waypoint. So since we want to be stationary, I right-click, and I put one next to the one that I just created. Now you see the coordinates where I put it. You could change those if you wanted to. Now it shows that you have 2. So at this point here, you can save that path, which we will do. If you want to start over, you could clear the points. Or you can import an existing one. So in this case here, we don't have one created yet, so we'll go ahead and save it. Now you will notice that the format is a GPX file. Now the same holds true for the boat, the airplanes, and the ground. Any routes that you create will actually be a GPX file. and it goes into the route folder. So I'm going to call it static in the dare range. So now I can recall this actual path at any time, and I'll know where they'll be at, and that it will be static. So now the next step we want to do is add a formation. Now in this area here, we need to pick one of the naval tests we created. We just created one, so we'll use that, and it's a column file. And notice where it goes by default in the column boats. So select the stationary Russian fleet, and then the path which was created in this area here, we go and select that one, and it goes into the route folder for the boat, static in the dare range. So now I have my stationary Russian fleet, static in the dare range, and I will give it a meaningful name, and I'll explain why in a moment. So static Russian fleet in the dare range. Now what's important before I add it to FSX, I need to set the GMT time, and I have created my GMT time here at 12. So I'm going to use 12 throughout the video so you see where I set it up. So I'll set it for 12:15. And at this point I just add it to FSX. Now one thing I want to show you, I'm going to go back into the add formation. So you remember that I typed a name here. Well, the name that I typed here created an oob.xml file. So let's say that I like that formation and that path, and I wanted to recall it. I could just go here, and it will go into the column and route. So it's basically a combination of column and combination of routes in the boat section. So this is the name I just gave it. So that gives me that fleet of Russian ships as well as that path that I selected. The combination of the two, it creates an independent file that you can reuse over and over. Now I could try to open it here just to give you an idea what it looks like, and it will open as an XML file, but it essentially has all the ships and their waypoint where they should be at and their speed. So it gives you an opportunity to quickly load a formation and a path combined. And you would do the same here and just set the time and then add it to FSX. In this case here, we're not going to use it, so we'll quit that portion here. So now that we added to the formation to FSX, if I look at the monitor, you will see that I have my fleet, 5 vehicles. Notice that it shows one waypoint because we're going at 0, so therefore it knows that it's a one waypoint. And the start time, there's no delay and there's no create AI before. So in other words, it's not going to create the boats after. It's not going to delay creating the boats for me, to create them right away. So now all I have to do would be to connect to FSX, and then I'd be able to load FSX and go see the ships. Now there's a disable pause in FSX. The reason behind that is that if you pause your session, and if you're alone, not a big deal, but if you're playing multiplayer and you're hosting the server, when you pause your FSX, the time stops, the counter time stops, but the counter time does not stop for the client that's connected to you because there's no synchronization between the two. Therefore, what's going to happen is everything's going to be out of sequence and not work out for you. So I recommend that you leave that alone. So now before we connect to FSX, I'm going to go back into the boat section, and we're going to choose to start on the carrier. Now notice there's a drop down here. So if I had multiple formations that I added with multiple carriers, and if you're hosting a multiplayer session, they could choose which carrier they want to join on. So just bear that in mind. And in my case here, I'm going to accept the default. There's multiple positions, and those positions are positions on a carrier that you can join on. Now this is the the carriers themselves, the position are defined in a file, and you'll see on the forum in FSX at War that people actually customize their pa.cfg. Now if I go into the folder, there's a pa.cfg file, and that file contains all of your carriers. And in our case here, the one that we're using is the Kiev, and the Kiev is right here. Notice how there's 5 positions, and that's where that came from. So in the Kiev, we got 5 positions to choose from. So now I choose to join on the carrier position 1. I'll validate my choice. And now, if I go back into monitor, I have a new option here. It says start a carrier. And in my case, I'm starting carrier on the Kiev at position 1. Now at this point, we're almost ready to join on the carrier. So all we have to do is say connect to the carrier, and then wait for the square to turn green. At this point, you're ready to start on the carrier. So let us go ahead and start on the carrier. And just so that you know, here you can monitor different aircraft, ships, and objects that you put in the monitor. Personally, I prefer to leave it as is and see all the objects, but it's a matter of preference. It allows you to filter what objects you look at, especially if you have a large number of them. So now I will start my FSX and join on a carrier. I won't make you sit through the terrain loading. I will get it all up and running and show it to you. Okay, so here we are on the boat, and we are on the Kiev. And just to show you the formation that we have, so if you recall, we put 2 destroyers and we put a couple of patrol boats, and that's all there is to doing that. So now hang tight. The next step is for us to create a moving formation. We have seen a static fleet, and now we're going to create a moving fleet. So I have created a fleet already, and I'm going to load the fleet. I've created a US Nimitz fleet, as you can see here, and going 30 knots. Now what I will do is I will create a path. I'm going to quit this because I already have it. I'm going to create a path, and now this time I'm going to do a transatlantic kind of a path here. I'm going to exaggerate a little bit just so you can see what we do. So we'll start from Virginia approximately and go across the Atlantic and make a turn here and go to France. Okay, I'm going to save my path. Okay, and this saves as a GPX, same as we did before. And the process is identical. So the only difference you saw is in the path that I created, where I could go and I'll bring this path back here. And I could go, and then one thing I want to show you is to see how I put 3 waypoints, but it added multiple waypoints. Number of 768. It did that so that it can closely track its direction. So now I'm going to go into the add formation to FSX. So the same process as before. I'm going to use the USS Nimitz 30 knots. I'm going to choose transatlantic, and here I'm going to give it a meaningful name. USS Nimitz transatlantic, and I'm going to set up the time that it will start. I'll make the time this time a little bit shorter here because we don't want to wait forever. And let me see, I'm going to make it 03, and I will adjust in the monitor. So let me add that to FSX. Now if I look in the monitor here, 1203, so 3 minutes after I join, it will kick me into the carrier. So now I'm going to go back into the boat section to select to start on the carrier. And here you have multiple positions to select. So I'm going to select position 1 and hit validate choice. Now if I go back in my monitor section, you will see that I have the Nimitz selected, position 1, and I'm ready to go. So now I will click to connect to FSX, wait for the green square, and then I am ready to join on the actual Nimitz. So I will go ahead and start my FSX and we'll meet back in here. Okay, we have now joined the fleet. We're on the carrier, and I want to show you the monitor. If you look at the monitor section, everything is spawned. And notice the time here. We said that the fleet was going to start moving at 12:03. So in 2.5 minutes, you'll have the fleet start moving towards France, doing a transatlantic. Now, one thing to keep in mind also is that if you're hosting a session, you want to make sure that you give yourself sufficient time for people to join. Otherwise, if the carrier is already moving, you cannot join on the carrier. So let's take a look at our fleet. And you see here I have a helicopter, I have the ships around. And I have this beautiful carrier, and I should have a ship on this side here too. There we go. So see how it's waiting to go, but it's not going yet. So once we get to 12:03, the ship will start moving. And maybe I can bring this up here. We're now 12:01. Position ourselves in front of the ships, and we'll actually watch them start their journey. Now as you can see, the fleet is starting to move. So that means we reach our time at 12:03, and the fleet is moving towards their objective. So that's it for the dynamic fleet. The next topic we will tackle is the vehicles. So hang tight, we're going to go to the vehicle section. The ground section is the next thing we're going to work on, and in the ground section it works essentially the same as the boat section, where you create a formation. In this case here in the ground section is called a column, and then you create a route for it to go to, and then you add it to FSX, just like you do in the boat section, except there's nothing to join on. So let's see how we create a convoy. Very simple. It's you have numerous objects here provided to you by FSX at War, and this is growing. And I will show you here, for example, we're going to start with creating surface-to-air objects. If you actually look at the preview, if you click, you see that you have other ones with different colors and different shapes that you can pick from. So in our case here, we're going to pick one of those. Now notice that there is a default speed, and in this case here I want to make them stationary, so I will make 0 as my default speed. And the next one I want to create 2 of them, so I'll select 2, and notice here you can change the actual speed. I want to make it stationary, and I could very well select to and add more if I wanted to. So I'm going to leave it at 1, or I'll pick 2. There we go. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pick 2 of the launchers and put it with it. So now I have these 4 objects that I will make that I will save as my column. Now I could import an existing column, and I'm going to stationary SAM. There we go. I will overwrite that because we're special. And the next thing I'm going to create is I'm going to create a formation of tanks traveling through the Dare County range. So we'll assign it a speed of 10 miles per hour, and I will pick create 2 at a time. I'll leave the delay. The delay here, minimum and maximum, is so that the vehicles don't all start at the same time. So it randomizes the distance between them. Now the tanks, just like any other objects, you have multiple models and colors. So I'll pick this model here, and it gives me 2. I will pick another one, and it gives me 2 of those as well. And I could very well add Jeeps, artillery, AAA, whatever we like. And AAA only has 1 of those, so I'll select that. And then I'll add 3 of something else, just for giggles. And let's pick this one here. Okay, so now we have multiple vehicles here. We're going to save it. And we'll call it a tank column at 10 miles per hour. So notice the file are COL files, which is for the same one, the same type of file format we had for the boats. So those are your formations. The difference is in the ground section, your formations are actual columns. You don't have the same, you don't position them like you do with ship formations. Now let's take a look at routes. Now routes is an interesting one where you have you have a lot of different choices. So let's say, for example, we want to use a pre-drawn map. Now, if you look in here, there's a lot of different maps that were contributed by the guys FSX at War and CCP, and creating those. And I will show you what it looks like. You can actually find a location on the map, or you can actually just click create. And what it does, it puts some coordinates for you so that it brings you to the map. Now, as the map will load here, you see this is the map for Afghanistan. Now, you can decide where you want to go from the lat long. You pick where you want to go from the lat long, and you could create a right click to create a start point. And you can pick another lat long. And if you're not sure how the GPS coordinates works, you can check out my video on GPS coordinates. And then you would right click and create another waypoint. So notice what happened here. It actually created the route automatically for you because we have it in manual mode. We could have it in an automatic mode, I mean. We could have it in manual mode where everything would be very manual. See, it does not create the routes for you, as opposed to automatic, which actually picks a route and brings you there. So that's something to keep in mind if you wanted to create stuff in the theater that are offered. Another means to create a route is using a photoreal. Now we're going to use photoreal for this demo. And photoreal, you can create the actual path on the fly. So if you recall, I had created some SAMs. I'm going to put them right about here. So I right click to create the first waypoint, and I right click again to create a second waypoint. Now since it's going to be static, it's going to stay there and will not move. So now I'm going to save the route, and I'm going to call it static at their range. And now I have a static route that I can use. I'm going to create another route. This one's going to be for moving tanks. So I'm going to go once again to the same place I was. And this time I'm going to make a route where my tanks are going to travel. So I'll make my tank start from here, let's say. Go here. And I'm going to put a bunch of points here because I want them to travel in between their range here. so we get a chance to see them travel when we go and fly in that area. So that should do it. And now once you have that route, you can save the route. Now notice here you can clear all the waypoints. You could actually clear all the waypoints or import one existing one, or you can save. And in our case, we're going to save, and we're going to call it across the dare range. Okay, so now we have our convoy created, we have our route created, so we're going to add them to FSX just like the boat section did. So now I'm going to pick the stationary SAM as my formation, and I'm going to pick the static at the dare range. I want my SAM to be in position and not be movable. And here I will call it static SAM on dare range. Now we'll give it a time that I want to have it start. I'll give it a time of 12:01. I'm going to make my FSX be 12:00. You want to avoid putting the exact same time because it may not start for you. So you want to have at least 1 minute after the time that you pick to start. Now we'll add this formation here. I don't remember if I saved that part before. No, I guess I did not. So now you see that I have my static SAM dare range, 4 vehicles, 1 waypoint because it's 0 miles per hour. And there's delays, but those won't come into play because it's not actually moving. And it starts at 12:01, and it does not create before I start. So that's good. Let's go back in the ground section. This time bring our other convoy. And this time we're going to bring the tanks moving 10 miles per hour. And we're going to bring the across the dare range route. And we're going to call it tanks moving at 10 miles per hour across their range. And I will also give it a time of 12:01. So now before I add it to FSX, I will show you here that the configuration, the combination that you create of tank columns or columns and routes combined together with this name actually save in here as a name. And this is in the column route folder, so that means it has ground formations and routes combined together into this file. It's an OOB.xml file. So we're going to add the one that we have here. And now if I go look in the monitor, and now I have my 2 vehicle formations in here and the time to start, and we're ready to go. So all I have to do is connect to FSX and wait for the green square to show up. So now I am ready to start and go look at what we've created. Okay, so we're approaching where we created our targets, and we're going to take a look where we've actually laid out our targets, or I mean our formations. So we're flying towards the static formation first, and you can tell the static formations because you can see the dust kicking. And I have a formation that's on the left hand side here that we'll show you in a minute. So there's our static SAMs. I'm going to try to give you a good view of it. And then we're going to go take a look at our moving tanks. There's our static vehicles here. And let's go take a look at our moving vehicles. So you can see our moving vehicles down here. And they're executing the delay of 5 to 20 random. So one vehicle is taken off. And they're all starting to take off now. So that is how you create moving columns, and the other ones will take off at a random interval. So that's how we do the ground vehicles. Hang tight, the next part is going to be the airplane part. We're now going to look at the airplane section. Now the airplane section works a little bit different, and you'll see there's some items here in the interface. For example, you can select to have your altitude in feet or in meters. If you're using meters, it's essentially 3 feet per meter is a good approximation. Now, what's different about this section here is when you create something, you're actually creating an OOB, which is a combination of the path and the airplane. But you can also import the path that you're creating as a GPX, because it creates a GPX for you, and we'll go through that. Another thing to note here in the interface is that you have a destination that you can select here, and I'm going to type Dare County Range and press enter, and it puts a pin exactly over the Dare County Range, which I use. In the planes here you have a list of all your planes, and similar to the boat area that you had seen, you have default speed that you can set, and the default speed that you use will be used when you add a waypoint into the list. And the default altitude, I'm going to change my default altitude to 500 feet. And I say feet because it's feet here, and I have feet selected. And I'm going to start at 1201 because I already have my simulator set up for 12:00:00 GMT. So now I want to show you something about the planes. So FSX at War, the folks have actually added a couple of planes for us, and you can tell because it starts with FSX at War Pack 1, a Eurofighter and a MiG-23. So that's what we're going to use today as a part of our demonstration. And I want to point out something. You have, let's take for example this Grumman here. I'm going to let it load. It's going to take a little while. You see that it populates the list, this drop down below here. And what that is that very same aircraft has different types associated with it. So for example, if you look at this this airplane here, and we switch to this airplane here, it is now it's going to be an airborne warning airplane. So you want to take a look at what you can get from here when you select a plane, and then you can drag it around to see what it looks like. So anyways, that's all I wanted to point out. We're going to create some airplanes here. We're going to put a Eurofighter, and we'll wait till it paints here. In this case here we only have one, and you can zoom with your mouse wheel if you like. Now in the map here, this is the area of interest that I have, so I will expand it. Now I'm going to make the airplane fly over the Dare range. So I'm going to create one waypoint here, one waypoint here, one waypoint here, one waypoint here, and finally one waypoint here, and let's get one over here. So now one thing I want to point out, so you see the waypoints I've created, they're all listed here for that Eurofighter, and I did this on purpose. So when you hover over, it tells you which waypoint number you're looking at. Now these are all customizable. You can change those. You can change the speed. You want to stay within the envelope of what the plane can do. Now this waypoint here, let's say that I don't want it to go to this waypoint. I can select waypoint 5 and press my delete key, and it will want you to confirm. And now the waypoint 5 that was here is gone, and the waypoint 6 now becomes waypoint 5. So now another method that you can use to actually delete is if you put your cursor over the waypoint, And your mouse wheel, you click with your mouse wheel, same thing. We'll ask you if you want to delete this waypoint, and waypoint 2 disappears, and you now have these waypoints. Just wanted to point that out, and I think I've already shown you that you can mouse wheel to zoom in, and you just drag around with the left click and hold. So I have this path saved here, this path created, I mean, with the Eurofighter. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to call it the Eurofighter, and save it and overwrite it. I created one before, that's why it's there. So now, if I want to create another airplane, first thing I need to do is add this formation that I have here to the monitor. So I add to the monitor, and I go to the monitor, and I have my Euro fighter around the range. And you have 3 waypoints and so on and so forth. So now I'm going to go back into the airplane portion. And now I don't want to recreate my waypoint, so I will select an airplane, and this time here I will select the MiG-23. Wait for it to paint, and I also want it at 500 feet. And I will actually import GPX that already exists, which is the path that I previously saved from my Euro around the dare range. So it's the exact same path. Do you want to replace the altitude with what I have here? No, I want to keep what I had in the file. So now you see how I have these waypoints here. And if you look here, you will see your waypoints that we had created earlier. So now I want to point out something that you can do, is you can actually take this waypoint, for example. I can tell it that I want it to be this waypoint 2. I'm going to go to waypoint 2 and make it 300 feet. And make waypoint 3 300 feet, 300 feet as well. And then waypoint 4, I'll make it go to 500 feet. I will leave it there. So the plane's got to climb to 500 feet here. So you can customize this to your liking. You can make it speed up. You need to keep in mind that the airplane will do what it's capable of within its flight envelope. So bear that in mind. Now you've noticed that I put 1201, even though I'm using 1200 in my as my GMT time. If it is the same as your GMT, it may not sync up right. So that's why I do add 1 minute just to be sure. And now that I have created this one, I will save. And this one here I'll save as a MiG-23 around the dare range. Once again, I had it already created, so therefore I'm just going to override it. Now I want to add this flight to the monitor. And if I look in the monitor, here's my flight, the Euro and the MiG-23. So now I'm going to go back in the airplane portion. This time I want to import one that I already created, which is a Euro, and I want to bring it in. But now I can't add it to the monitor because it has the same name that I already saved. So what you want to do is I'm going to change the time here just so that I have it. And I will save the OBV, but this time I will just change the name. So select the Euro that I created already, give it a number 2, and then save. In this case here, we'll override because it already exists. Now that I have a number 2, I can add it to the monitor. So now if I look at the monitor, I have my Euro 1 and Euro 2 and the MiG-23. Now the MiG-23 is going to change altitude, whereas the Euro 1, Euro 2 will not. And because they have 2 different flight envelopes, chances are once we go and see how they fly, we will be seeing the 2 Eurofighters together, and the MiG will be either in front or behind it. So we'll see how that works out. So once you have done so, now you're ready to go and connect to your FSX. So let's click on Connect FSX, and we're waiting for the green square. And There we go. So we have the green square. We're ready to rock and roll. So let's jump in the plane and go take a look to see what that looks like. Okay, I've located the Eurofighters. So what's kind of cool about it is you can actually use it for gun practice, weapon practice, formation flying practice, and somewhere around here there's also a MiG-23. At least I think they're Eurofighters. Yeah, there seems to be two of them. And they're flying on the path that we predicted, and they are at 500 feet. So that's the two Eurofighters. And there's a MiG, I suspect, behind us. So that's pretty cool. Now any planes that you have, you can actually use to do this. Now see the MiG is probably this airplane over here, so let's go and find this this bad boy. And if you remember, this one actually turns on us and it changes altitude. Now should be going over to their range, and we'll go take a look at the MiG. And that's all there is to creating those planes. As you can see, if you use your imagination, there's a lot of missions and things you can set up. Try not to lose them here. Sorry about that. Something just took the focus away here. And that should be our MiG here. He's also going at 250 knots. And he's traveling the path that we've actually told him to. So that's the MiG-23. So there you have it. So that's how you do the airplane section. We are going to look at the TacPack section of the CCP, and that's very exciting. There's a lot of improvements that have been made in this area, and essentially it became a TPS file editor where it allows you to load, save, and edit TPS files. Now the interface looks very much the same as the airplane interface that we looked at before, where you can choose a destination, for example, or you can select feet or meters. If you're familiar with the TPS files, the native format in the TPS files is in meters, so it's great that we have a conversion in for us here. Much like the other one that we looked at, you can zoom in to those areas. So it's fantastic. So now, one thing to understand is the TPS file created in the TacPack section are not actually loaded with the CCP. They are loaded in your simulator. So this is it creates a file that you can load later on in your flight simulator using the TacPack menus. Now another thing that sets it apart is that the TacPack objects that you created here, the planes and the boats, will only go in a straight line. They do not follow any path. CCP is your tool of choice if you want to have predetermined path for airplanes or for boats. Another restriction is that the boats themselves can only be seen in single player mode. So if you want to add some AI boats in the single player mode, it'll be fine, but you will not see them in the multiplayer mode. Now, when I say simple AI boats, I don't mean the carriers, because those you can see in here, and we'll go through that. Now, there's an object list here, and you see that there's aircraft, boats, and a bunch of objects here. We'll go through each one of those, but I want to tell you the limits. You only have a finite amount of aircrafts you can create, and that is 100. You can create 100 boats, 1 drone, 1 tanker, 1 carrier, 10 SAM sites, and you can create up to 100 photoreal objects. But now the photoreal objects share the same category as the AI aircraft. So therefore, if you create 10 photoreal objects, you can only create 90 aircraft, and vice versa. So those are the limits that you have in these objects. Now, one thing I want to point out is if you set the carrier and the tanker at the exact same GPS coordinates, while your carrier is moving, your tanker will stay in orbit with your carrier. So bear that in mind, and we are able to edit those into in this interface here. Now, the carrier and the TacPack portion does have a TACAN that you can select. The boat section, as you recall, we could not set the TACAN on the carrier. CCP is still waiting for VRS to provide them with a means to create a TacPack carrier inside the boat section. So for now, it's a no-go. I know a lot of people are waiting for that, including myself. Now let's take a look at loading a TPS file. I will import a file, and I'll use a file that I've already created to show you the objects. So you see there's numerous objects in here, and much like the other interfaces, when you click on the actual object itself, the waypoint, it actually shows you what object is there. So in this case here, 11 is aircraft 04. Now what you can do in here is you can actually go and delete objects. For example, if I want to delete the simple AI, this object here, object number 2, you can select it and press your delete key, get confirmation, and it deletes it. Another way you can delete objects, you can actually go and use your mouse wheel and click your mouse wheel and delete an object. Now there's also another tool that was added for us. So for example, if I have this tanker here, which by the way, if you look, has the same coordinates, so the tanker will orbit the carrier. But let's say if I wanted to change the, let's pick the carrier. So I got the tanker here, where's the carrier? So let's say the carrier is here, and I want to, it's right on top of it, that's why we can't see it. So the carrier, so let's say if I want to change the heading of the carrier. Now there's a heading helper that was added in the tool where you can actually determine which direction it's going to go. So the way you use it is you press the control key and hold the control key. Then you actually left click and hold your waypoint and pick a direction that you want to go. Then release the left click and release the control key. Now you will notice here that it changed the actual degrees for the carrier itself. Now you could use those degrees, 181.5, and I could change it on the carrier here. So 181.5, and I could put the same into the tanker. So that's the heading helper. And now once you've done changing what you want to do, you can actually save your TPS file. So I'll go ahead and save it, and I'll call it TPS2. Now I want to point out that you notice the files are all TPS files, and it's located into your CCP mission and TPS folder. So now we'll save on top of that and overwrite it. Now you'll be prompted to edit the file. Now what it does is it gives you a way to bring in the editor if you need it. So in our case we're going to say yes. If we said no, it would disappear and be done. But we're going to say yes. So it brings up an editor and you can see everything that you had in your TPS file. Everything that we just created is in here. But one thing I want to point out that was added, there was some conversion added for us. So this is the native GPS coordinates that are put in the TPS file. The CCP team actually added a conversion for us to degree, minutes, and seconds. And those coordinates, if you, for example, in the Superbug, you can plug them right into your Superbug GPS coordinates. Or if you fly another aircraft, you have GPS coordinates that you can enter into your GPS instrument. So one more functionality to help us create missions. That is fantastic. It works great. So we're done with that portion here looking overall. The next thing we're going to tackle is looking at each one of those objects and creating some objects in here. Before we start looking at the actual creating of a TPS file, I want to talk about the concept of team. And in the team, as far as TacPack is concerned, your team that you select will differentiate whether you're enemy or enemy of whoever else you're flying with or whatever objects you have. For example, there are 7 teams that you can be paired on. So if I go into the VRS TacPack here, I can select my team. So right now I'm on team 2. I can put myself on team 4. Then everything that's on team 4 will appear as a friendly. If you use team 0, it basically means that nobody's friendly to you and you look as an enemy to everyone else. Now the reason why I'm bringing this up is because in the objects here you will see that you have a IFF team. So basically the first digit, which is a mode 4 IFF in the VRS Superbug if you fly a Superbug, when you set your IFF mode 4 to a code of 4 and then 3 other digits, the first number represents the team you're part of. So now I am on team 4 as you saw when I selected. So we're going to start by putting in some static airplanes. So it's going to be statics, it's going to be on the ground, 0 speed, 0 knots, and for now I'm going to put 0 as the direction is going to be. I'm going to pick something nice and large to put as a target. Airbus will do the trick. So I'll zoom into where I want to put it, and we'll put it in their range right here. Okay, let me add it right here. And now I'm going to use my heading helper by pressing Control, left click and drag, and that gives me 16.8 degrees. So I will set this to 16.8, and I know that it will be pointing in that direction. So now I'm going to put a second one next to it. There we go. So I have 2. The next thing we're going to do is create a moving plane that will move in a straight line. And let me see here. If it's except war, I'm going to use a Eurofighter. And Eurofighter, I will make it friendly. I'll leave it on team 4. So everything on here is going to be team 4. So I'm going to put a Eurofighter right about here. Now the Eurofighter, I want to have it going at 5,000 feet, 300 knots, true airspeed, and it's going to be friendly. I'll leave it on team 4. And the directions I want it to take, I will give it a direction with a heading helper again. It's going to head towards the SAM site, 201.8. So let me put 201.8. There we go. So now I'm going to create an enemy. And this time I'm going to use a MiG-23. Nothing against Russians, just somebody has to be an enemy and somebody has to be a friendly. So I'll change the team here, so enemy team will be team 2. And I will put the MiG at, let's say, 3,000 feet and coming at 300 knots. And I'll put this bad boy right here. Now I'm going to use the heading helper, control left click and drag. Now because this plane's on team 2, if I put my SAM on a different team, it will shoot it down. So now I have a 145.8, let me put that in there. So now I have my planes put in there. The next thing we're going to add is a static boat. Now I'm going to pick let's pick this carrier here. And I'm going to put it in this body of water here. I don't want it to go anywhere. I just want it to stay still here. So I give it 0 knots. And I will give it the heading once I put it in. So I'll put it here. And control left click and drag. 0 knots, 5 degrees, it will be pointing that way. So let me just change that to 5 degrees. It was 5.4, but 5 degrees would be good enough. Okay, so now we have a static boat that's not going anywhere. Next thing I'm going to do is put a moving ship here, and I could have multiple ships together and play around with these that long. You can adjust all these to your liking. So I'm going to pick something else here. Okay, let's pick this one here. I'm going to give it a 30 knots, and it's going to be heading in this direction here. I'll put it here, heading helper. Let's go now 10 degrees. So it's that simple. Now remember that the ships, when you put down ships, you will only see them with a DPS file while you're in single player mode. They will not show up in multiplayer mode. So I've created those. Now I'm going to add a drone. Now the drone, I'm going to have it go 10,000 feet. And I'll pick the heading in a moment here. So I'll say 0 for now. And 250 knots. And the behavior, I'm going to set it to 0, but I'll show you how you determine what the behavior is. So let's put our drone, select our drone, and I will put it around this area here and pick a direction for it. So 3.6 degrees, close enough. I'll put 4 degrees. So now I have the drone flying this way. The behavior itself you actually get from the menu. So let's take a look at the drone. So if I look at a drone, if I want to create a drone, there's behavior here. So the behavior, the way it works is the first behavior is 0, the next one is 1, 2, and 3. So I selected 0, so it would be straight and level. So that's where you get that information. And over time you will remember those. So now I will add a tanker. So now the tanker itself, I get to pick the team that will be on. So I did say that the friendly team would be team 2, I believe. Or was it team 4? Anyway, it doesn't really matter, but you get the drift with the team, how it works. I'm going to pick a KC-135. And the heading I will give it in a moment here, 16,000 feet, 250 knots. Okay, so now there's a few things here. So let's start by setting the directions. Okay, the heading helper. Okay, so I got 3.7. And now the frequency and the orbit. So let's start with the orbit type. I'm going to select 0, but the orbit you would get when you go into the menu here and look at the actual tanker selection. So if you look at the tanker and you see orbit, so these work the same way. 0 is the NATOP orbit, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 would be straight, no turns. So that's how you pick your orbit. So I've selected that. 0 here. Now the frequency, the TacPack frequency. Now if you've used a Superbug, for example, you know that the TacPack shows up as channels and not frequencies. There's an easy way to convert them. So it's 109.5. If you go into your aircraft manager, under the reference tab and the TacPack reference, if you look at 109.05, it's actually 27 Yankee. So that's how you can determine or change to the frequency that you want. So now we have, so you have this now ready to go, and we're going to add a carrier next. Okay, I'll pick a straight Nimitz, and we're going to give it a speed of 30 knots, and a heading, we're going to head the same direction that our oh, doesn't look like we added our tanker. Anyways, let's add the carrier and I'll go back to the tanker. So there's the tanker here. That's a drone. Okay, so I'll add the carrier next to the drone here. So the frequency, TacPack, same thing. The frequency and ILS frequency. So this one here is a straight out number. And here, point of defense. 0, it will shoot anything that's not on team 2. 0 will not shoot anything. 1 will turn on the point of defense, so anything that's not on team 2 will shoot. So I'll put the point of defense at 0. And I'll add the carrier right about here. Now I will set up my directions here. 4 degrees. So let's set this to 4 degrees. Now I'm going to go back and add the tanker. Let's go back to the tanker here. Add KC-135. And it was on team 2. Orbit type we select to 0. And the degrees, we'll make it 4 degrees just like the carrier was. Okay, and now that we have our information, we'll go ahead and right click to add it at the same place as the carrier. So here's the reason why. These two, when you put the tanker and the carrier at the same coordinates, it will actually cause the tanker to follow your carrier and always orbit over your carrier. So here what I do just to be sure, notice how these two are already together. I simply copy this one here and paste it into that box here. So this way they're both in sync. So now let's take a look at the next object that we're going to select. SAM site. So this one, the parameters are very simple. 1 is enable, meaning it's going to shoot at stuff, and 2 and 0 is disabled. So I'll disable it so that all my work doesn't get shut down as I demonstrate, and we'll make it on team I think we said team 4. No, team 2 is friendly. So now I have my SAM and I'm ready to add it. So let me just find a spot to add it. And this is a good spot to add it, right in the center. See how you can get very granular? And I'll add it right here. So I now have a SAM at that location. The next thing we're going to create is photoreal object. Now photoreal object is a little bit different. So you see here you have, as we talked before, you have circles, rectangles, and squares. So what you can do is actually go and find a photoreal target. So for example, this target here that you see would not explode normally. But because the empty target, what it will do is you can put an empty target right on top of it, and once you hit that target, it will actually explode. So let's select this target here. It could be any photoreal objects at all. So you got some buildings here, so let's put a big one. Let's find a large one and put it right on top in the center here. And let's pick another one here. Let's pick this one here. Now the one thing that it does is once you put photoreal targets, it actually creates an MU that gives you the coordinates where those photoreal targets are. So that could have easily been a bridge that's in FSX that you want to cause to explode. Could be any objects at all. So it's a really cool feature that allows you to bomb stuff that normally would not explode. So now once you have saved, once you have created all your targets, you go ahead and save a TPS file, and we're going to call it my TPS file. I will overwrite this one here. Now replace it, yes. And here, do you want to edit the TPS file? Now I will say yes just to show you that you have all these targets here, 2 on the ground, 3 on the ground. So you got all these targets already defined for you here. And if you needed the lat long and decimal in the degrees, minutes, and second format, it's all here converted for you to ready to copy and paste. So now that we have that, what you can do is you can go into your aircraft manager, and I told you that it created an MU for you. So if I load an MU, so I go to load an MU, I go onto the CCP folder, under mission, under TPS, and now you see my TPS MUINI. So that's the one I just created. You open it up, it loads it, and there's our 3 targets ready to be used with the GPS weapons. So that's it in a nutshell in creating the TPS file. Now once you've created the TPS file, you need to load it into your FSX. So we're going to do that now. All you have to do is go to the add-ons menu and go to the miscellaneous, VRS miscellaneous, select debug, and then select scenario, and then select the file you just created. Now you hear some noise because I happen to have some large airplanes created here. But one thing I want to point out is if you look, the tanker will orbit the carrier. So it's an indication that your TPS file was added properly. So that's all there is to that. You basically have your TPS file loaded. If I go look and the menu is here, you'll see that you have a carrier, you have a drone, you also have let me return here. You have a SAM site created and it's disabled, and we also, I guess it doesn't want to let me do it 2 at the same time, and we also have a tanker orbiting the carrier. The next thing we're going to look at is the monitor section. So in the monitor section, you will notice here that there is a save mission and there's an import mission. Now what I've done is I've created a mission based on what we had created so far. So let me go ahead and import it. So I want to show you that it comes from the CCP folder under mission, and it's under saved section. So now the fantastic thing about this is that, as I'm going to do now, I can import what I had created before. So those are all the things that we created before. And then I can go here and change the timing to however I want. And then it's ready to go. So you create this extensive mission, you can recall it at will. So this is great for mission planning and repeating missions. And you can also go here and change some of the stuff around. So you could very well go here and delete this one, for example, and let's say you don't want a static SAM. So see how we have altered it, and I could go into the ground and add some different components to it and save it as a different mission, and just save it and call it my demo 2 or whatever. So it ends with MIS. Now one word about sharing. So other people that have CCP, when you are sharing a mission file or sharing a OOB.xml, you can share, but be aware that the person you're sharing it with needs to have the exact same objects that you have selected in those files. Otherwise, it will not work because it can't fly. For example, the MiG-23 in Euro would be fine because it comes with CCP. But let's say you had some variation of F-14. Well, unless they have that F-14 themselves, it will not show up in here. Or let's say you have an ambulance, you know, and then you put it out there and they don't have the ambulance, it will not work. So bear that in mind. And all you do is very simple. You just load up your mission and you're ready to go. You just tweak it, connect to FSX, and it will create all your objects and be ready to go once you put it in. See, your objects are already loaded. So that's all there is to the monitor section. Like I said, it gives us a lot of flexibility now and the ability to create missions that we spend a lot of time on and load them up really quick. So that's essentially it for the monitor section. The next portion we're going to look at is actually creating, using our mission, loading it up in the multiplayer session, and connecting to it and have somebody else connect to our multiplayer session and see what that looks like. Now it is time to load up into a multiplayer session. So as you see behind the screen here, I have multiplayer selected and my GMT time is 11:55:00. Now I'm going to start it in server mode, and you see the IP address is 0000. What that essentially means my own IP address. So leave that at 000 if you're hosting. And the ports, those are the default ports. I recommend you leave them that way because the client side has those default ports as well. If you decide to change them, just make sure that you share it with the people connecting to you and ensure that these ports are open on your firewall or router as well as the FSX ports. So I will start the CCP, and I'm also going to start the session in the background so that we don't have to wait for it to load while it's running. Okay, so let's go into our CCP. Oh, I gotta finish loading up here. Okay. Now in CCP I'm going to go into monitor and I'm going to load that mission of mine. My demonstration mission, that's the one we created together. I'll set that to 0. And FSX is loaded in the background. Now I will go to the boat section and select to join on the carrier. I'm going to pick the Kiev. I could have picked the Nimitz, but we'll do that with the client side. So I have validate choice, meaning that I acknowledge that's the one I want to get. And in monitor, it shows up at the bottom here. So now I'm going to create a server and start the server. It says you want to replace it. Yes, I have used it in the past. Now I'm going to connect to FSX and wait for my objects to load. Okay, and I'll make sure that there we go. So we are on the Kiev. So now notice all the objects are loaded. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to load our TPS file. Go to add-on, miscellaneous, debug, scenario, and my TPS file. So now the TPS objects are being added. We should see synchronization of the tanker and the carrier. There we go. Tanker will orbit the carrier. Now if we look at the monitor section, you will see that we have all our objects created here, and you do have some filters where you can filter what you're looking at. So CCP objects, helicopters, aircrafts, Eurofighter and all that good stuff that we have, and vehicles, ships. So this is it. So now you're in multiplayer session. You've noticed that I started in FSX first and then I started CCP, and the reason being is that we want to make sure the objects have enough time to get generated before you join on the carrier. And also the the client side, you want to give yourself enough time for them to join. Let's say, for example, the Nimitz here is taking off at 12:05, and this is the current time. So leave enough time for your client side to be able to join the carrier before the carrier takes off. And that's about it. So now we're going to go take a look at the client side of the house and see how we join on the client side. We are now going to join as a client. Click on the client mode. Make sure you have the host IP in the same port. Click on validate. Now what you want to do is go in the boat section under the add formation, and you will see my blue zone is there. You select it and then get to select it, and that basically loads you into the session. Now at this point you can join on the carrier, so you go to the join the carrier portion, select the carrier that you want to have, and then select your position. And we'll pick number 5 and validate the choice. And now things should start loading up. You go look at the monitor section. Set to 0 for the delay. And notice at the bottom it says you're going to join the carrier. So click on Connect FSX, wait for the green dot. There we go. And now we're going to have our item starts to spawn, and we should show up on the carrier. There we go. So we're now on the carrier. And that's all there is to it to get on the carrier. So just remember to leave yourself ample time. Now that's it for the video. I know it's been a long one, but this one's going to be the base video. So any subsequent updates, I will only cover updates. So you can always refer to this one. I will put description in the actual description, the timelines, so which sections are which. So thank you very much for watching. If you like my video, subscribe and hit like. And until next time, you take care.